Slants.
What's up, everybody? It's Tom Curran. I am here at the Breakers in Palm Beach, and there is so much going on. Yeah, it might look nice, but the heat has been turned up as of today by Robert Kraft. Here is the game plan for this evening's show. We will, of course, have Phil Perry with us, but Robert Kraft ratcheting up the heat a little bit on Bill Belichick. Also, Belichick talking about the state of the Patriots in this 2022 offseason. And, of course, we will have all of that content and a poll and comments. But first, ladies and gentlemen, I want to hit you with my slant. And here's Robert.
I'll just say I'm a Patriot fan, big time, first. And more than anything, it bothers me that we haven't been able to win a playoff game in the last 3 years. And I'm happy that I think we had a great draft last year, and it made up for what happened the previous 4 years or so. And I look forward to hopefully having a great draft this year. That's the only way you can build your team for long-term and consistently that you have a chance of winning.
Robert Kraft feels your pain, and notice the choice of words at the top of his commentary. I am a Patriots fan, big time. He is aligning himself with the fans. He's not going all the way back to when he was sitting on the metal bleachers in old Foxborough Stadium, but he's making it clear that even though the pain has not been as significant as some franchises, after 20 years of success, 3 years without a playoff win is not what he's looking for. Now, we could talk about a rebuild. We could talk about the fact that the Patriots are post-Brady. We could talk about all of the things that have contributed to it. But as Kraft pointed out on multiple occasions, and you'll hear later in the show, he laments the drafting, which, of course, is part of the talent evaluation. So, Bill Belichick might not be necessarily on notice, but again, Robert Kraft is reminding us all that he has noticed, and that this franchise, this year, he's expecting big things from, Meg-A.
That's right, Tom. I wouldn't say that Bill Belichick has been put on notice by Robert Kraft. And by the way, you look wonderful in the Florida sunshine down there. We're all a little bit jealous.
Thank you.
But I think he's essentially saying, how long? How long is this going to take? Robert Kraft sounds like he's working with a contractor on a kitchen rebuild, and he thought he was just tearing out the cabinets, and now all of a sudden, 8 weeks later, he's waiting on a back-ordered oven and range stove, and he's sick of microwaving his meals. But that said, for someone who's a little bit impatient after 2 decades of near constant winning and domination, he does have a point with the draft. Good roster building comes through the draft, but that might mean a few more years of pain, given that they're just really one draft deep of solid drafts. Am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right, and very good points all the way through. And I think the drafting is something that is a burr in his saddle, as is, and he mentioned it last year, and I think that this was in Robert Kraft's mind coming down here. The free agent spending that occurred in 2021 was a one-shot deal. And those guys have to develop this year as well. Bill Belichick speaking about that as well. But I think if you look at this, it's fascinating because Robert Kraft kind of flexed his muscles a little bit, I think, today and said that, you know what? These are the expectations I have for this particular business. And as successful as that manager has been, I'm still looking for results. He's not resting on his laurels, Meg-A.
And that's not to say that he doesn't have a huge investment in this team. All you have to do is go down to Foxborough and see what he's doing with the stadium. He's building him a new lighthouse. But he wants to be very strategic, and I think he's still holding on to this sense of the Patriot way that he put in. He doesn't want to do things like everybody else does in the league. After a poor season without their quarterback, that they're going to do it through free agency or bring in a giant star. This is the way they do it. But Tom, you put out a poll this week, and you asked fans from the stands, now that you've heard Kraft and Belichick speak this week, how has your outlook on the 2022 Patriots changed? Well, 18% are remaining fully bullish. 17% say they feel better now. 52% remain in the pessimistic camp, and 13% say they feel even worse. Brian came in saying, it's never changed. In Bill, I trust. And Tall Guy says it's not that the Pats will be a terrible team, it's that the rest of the AFC seemingly has gotten significantly better, thus the net result, which is mediocrity at best. And Tom, I mean, coming out of that, in those same breaths, Robert Kraft said that he expects this team to be a contender. So you have to ask this year, a contender of what? A contender to get back to the playoffs? A contender to win a playoff game? Or an actual Super Bowl contender? Because just looking within your very own division, that's a pretty steep goal.
Yeah, and I think that off the cuff, put on the spot as to how will the team do, I think he might have been premature in saying contender, because the contender that the Patriots we are accustomed to seeing is a team that plays in the AFC Championship annually and did so from 2011 through 2018. So contending, last year they were a playoff contender. I expect that that should be their aspiration to me. Here's Bill Belichick, though. We had him on Monday, and I wanted to ask him, is this team better than the one that closed the 2021 season?
Bill, when you've said in the past you're either getting better or you're getting worse, and when you look at some of the outflow with Josh McDaniels and J.C. Jackson, some of the other assistants, and Kyle Van Noy and Shaq Mason, from the outside it looks like a significant amount of important players and coaches have left. Have you guys gotten better or worse since the loss to Buffalo?
Yeah, well, we'll find out next year. See, I think some of the players that we have on the roster, hopefully we'll take a step up, but we'll see. And we'll have other players. There'll be new players here, and we'll see what happens with them.
See, I don't hate that answer. I don't think it was evasive, and we will see. And I think that the second portion where he acknowledges, Meg, that some of these guys have to play better in their second year, whether it's Mac Jones, who had a very good first year, or Jonnu Smith, who in his first year with the team did not, that's a step that's expected. But again, it gets back to the draft, and it gets back to the selection. And I think, Meg, agree with me or disagree, that one of the big sticking points is the fact of who is doing the coaching and cultivating the talent, Meg.
Absolutely. And we'll get into this later in the show with a glimpse at my Meg-A Hot Take, but it is a lot to put on one person to be doing the shopping and then doing the cooking and potentially doing a lot of the other coaching as well. And I guess the big question to me is, do you see guys like Kendrick Bourne, do you see guys like Jalen Mills taking a much bigger step in their sophomore season with the Patriots?
I mean, we're going to have to find out how much better they can get. But absolutely, I think Kendrick Bourne, you get familiar and you can ratchet up some of the things that that player does. Also, you can move away from some of the things that you don't think he does well. Coming up after the break, we will summon the senator. He will be alongside to give his take on what Robert Kraft had to say today at the Breakers. Stay tuned. All right, Robert Kraft, we caught up to him today at the Breakers in Palm Beach, Florida. Somebody had to do it. We did it. We gave you a preview a little bit earlier. Here's the rest of Robert Kraft.
Robert, when it comes to the draft, it can be a little bit slower build. We've seen a lot of teams use free agency to try to get a lot better, a lot faster. You guys used free agency last year, and you improved by 3 wins. Are you comfortable if it is a slower build towards getting back to where you guys want to be?
Well, if what is a slower build?
If it takes a few years for the team to be, in true contention, or do you expect that to happen as soon as this year?
I expect it to happen as soon as this year. I think we've made the commitments as an organization, and I think we have a lot of talent and, some wonderful young men from last year and a couple in the weeds from before, and it's a chance for them to grow and hopefully come together, and the team comes together. I think, on these young quarterbacks, the good ones in the second year have usually grown a great deal, and I think I'm a big fan of Mac Jones. I think, see how hard he works, and he wants everything to go right, and he puts the time and energy, and his personality is a team guy. So we have a chance, because without a good coach and a good quarterback, no matter how good the other players are, I don't think you can win consistently. And hopefully, I believe we have both, outstanding coach and a good young prospect at quarterback.
So what's your level? What we've seen in the AFC, this sort of arms race during free agency, has that caused you to recalibrate expectations for your team? Or when you view what's gone on with talent acquisition, do you feel you're right there?
Well, you can use all the analytics and everything, but until you play the games and things happen, and I think people who don't understand our sport also don't understand the opportunity cost of not having players on the field. If you saw our nutrition staff and our rehab staff and our weight room people, is a composite picture trying to give us a chance to have as many of the guys out there on Sunday as possible. And that makes a big difference. And I'm really excited and look forward to this coming year.
Robert, after last year, when the team spent a lot of money in free agency, this year it's been a quieter offseason in terms of that. How would you describe the team's plan and approach this year to get better?
Well, I think we have a lot of young players that are coming into their own. I don't think free agency is over. I know the big spending you remember we have a salary cap, so there's only so much we can do in that area. I do think that we have an opportunity to pick people up right along the way, right down to the final cuts. That's, to me, when free agency is over, and I've seen it other years, and people get all excited with the headlines now, but in the end, it's what happens throughout the entire year.
All right, there's Robert Kraft. I thought it was a good session today, Phil, and you were front and center. What were your impressions?
I thought so too. I thought the expectations and the bar were set very high today. I disagree with you a little bit. I think when you hear contention in association with the New England Patriots, you think championships.
Yes.
And I mentioned earlier in the question, listen, on me, hand up. I should have mentioned the word championship or Super Bowl maybe, but I did mention to get where you want to go. And we know that's where they want to go eventually. And it sounds like, at least relative to, I think, the rest of the fan base, Tom, he thinks they're on schedule. Are they really?
That's when he keeps referencing the drafts. And he is a very smart man, smarter than we are. And he can look at these drafts and see how many of these players have been contributors and how many are trending toward being contributors. The number of third-round picks and second-round picks. And we're not even getting it to N'Keal Harry. So there has to be vast improvement from those players at that second level. Found it interesting how often he mentioned the drafts, and he's almost keeping the heat up in a repeat of last year when he said we have to draft better, we're not buying a team every year.
Think it was coincidence that last year he turned up the heat when it came to the draft and how they needed to do a better job, and then they had a better draft?
I don't think that he thinks it is.
I agree with you. So I think when he talks to us and he says, I'm very disappointed, we haven't won a playoff game in 3 years, that to him is putting the pressure on to an extent. And they're going to need contributions, Tom, from whether it's drafted guys or under the radar guys. He did get to the in the weeds players
guys
that maybe we're not thinking of, that I think could help. The Cam McGrones of the world and the Raekwon McMillans of the world, they may end up having a real role, and maybe those are the guys he's got in mind when he thinks that this team is really capable of a lot.
And we're going to get into that in Quickfire after, of course, the Meg-A Hot Take, when we start talking about some of the defensive alterations. When Robert Kraft talks about the team in general and the improvements that it needs to make, do you feel as if he is saying things that Bill Belichick will bristle at?
No, I don't think so. I think Bill Belichick would look at his team honestly and feel like there's plenty of improvements that need to be made there as well. I thought when it came to his head coach, the fact that he was willing to acknowledge, Kraft was, that He does things a little differently.
Yep.
And even I don't understand it sometimes, but it tends to work out. I found that interesting as well, especially given, obviously, the coaching situation that we've been talking about for months here.
I find it interesting the way Robert Kraft was aligning himself with the fans, is almost putting himself on the seat next to them, and not really. He aligned himself with them as opposed to really aligning himself with Bill. He didn't spend time trying to assuage people's concerns about where the team is. He was right there next to the 63% or so of people who feel a little pessimistic.
Well, because I think he wants to be honest with them, and he's honest with himself. And thankfully, I felt like he was honest with us when he talks about the fact that they just haven't been good enough these last 3 years, and we're used to seeing them perform a certain way. He's used to seeing them perform a certain way, and when they don't get there, it's a real disappointment. That's why I get back to, Tom, when we talk about how good can this team be, I continue to come back to they should be at least maintaining, if not improving. I feel like if we make excuses for why they will be bad while they'll take a step back, that would be a disappointment in 2022 for them.
Well, a few years ago, after that 2019 playoff loss, it was Tom Brady's final game here, Bill Belichick was asked what he had to say to fans who had been through thick and thin with his team. And at the time, Bill Belichick said, "I don't think there's been a lot of thin around here." Well, 3 years down the road, it does sound like Robert Kraft has had enough of the thin, even though it's barely even wafer thin. Coming up after the break, we got Quickfire, and of course, the mega hot take. We'll see you in a second.
Check out a new Patriots Talk podcast. Phil Perry and Tom Curran react to Robert Kraft's comments from today and the signing of Jabril Peppers. You can find it on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube. Time now for my mega hot take. There's a saying around here, in Bill we trust. During this rebuild, fans, along with the Patriots organization, are seemingly putting more trust into Bill Belichick than we've seen since January of 2000 when he took over the team. Back then, Bill told us he learned a lesson on delegation in Cleveland. He said, "This is no one-man band here. I can't play all the instruments." And yet, Bill is the GM, the head coach, has no coordinators named on offense or defense. He has a promising quarterback entering a critical second year without his mentor, Josh McDaniels, and he faces a lethally challenging AFC with one of the hottest teams in his own division. That's a lot of sheet music for someone intending to just play one or two instruments. You better hope his backup band can cook.
Every single time, Meg-A, every single time you just absolutely slam that thing out of the park. Great point. We didn't even get to it yet, Phil.
No, listen, this is going to be a difficult year, I think, for Bill Belichick. Given all the responsibility that I think he's going to have to take on the offensive side specifically, Tom. That has been Josh McDaniels' side of the ball for a long, long time. He's been able to lean hard on that guy. Now he's going to have to do some of it himself.
And one thing, Meg, will tell you from down here, no one has yet approached us and said, that seems like a great idea what they're doing here. There's a lot of people saying, Bill will figure it out, but there's no one saying, I really like it.
Let's get into what people are saying down there. Time now for Quickfire. And our first subject is the Patriots contingent. Guys, who exactly is down there for the Patriots besides Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick, who we've heard from?
You've got your Matt Groh, who's the director of player personnel, the new director of player personnel. But you also have Matt Patricia, Tom, whose title I'm not quite sure of, but we know he'll be working with the offensive staff. That's something Bill Belichick made very clear in his session with us the other day. Outside of working on the offensive staff, I'm not sure what else Matt Patricia's doing these days, though.
Broad responsibilities are what we were told. So contractual stuff, he did some of that last year.
Right.
But you also have Robert and Jonathan Kraft. But it is interesting to see the amount of time that Matt Patricia spends alongside Bill Belichick and what his role really is. Because if he is just here post-Detroit in kind of a lick his wounds and get back out into the world again situation, he does seem to be spending a lot of time getting squired around the square by Bill.
Grooming? Is there grooming happening?
Could be grooming, squired, yeah.
Grooming. My favorite piece of news that you guys got so far was Bill Belichick. I believe this was Phil Perry, Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia hustling out to that picture and just barely missing it. But on to the AFC arms race. So over the last week, there have been significant additions throughout the AFC we haven't gotten to talk to here on Quick Slants. Biggest of all, probably the Tyreek Hill addition. What is the word down there? How are people taking those additions?
I like the Bill Belichick answer to acknowledge that, yeah, we know Tyreek Hill has come into this division and we're going to have to make some strides, and we have the draft to do that. Phil is our resident draft cognoscente. How are they going to be able to address that in the draft? And we're going to talk to Jabril Peppers in a little bit, too, as a way they're addressing it.
Well, and that conversation will be part of the overall conversation about the Patriots needing to get faster. I talked to one NFL executive, Meg, familiar with the Patriots program, who said it's quote-unquote concerning the Patriots' lack of speed, or it should be for the Patriots at least. I think they've gotten faster at the linebacker level, but at corner, those guys that have to run around with Tyreek Hill, not quite yet.
Absolutely. I think all you had to do was watch the last two Bills games to raise concerns about the speed on defense. What else are people saying down there? Moving on to word on the street, what are the league impressions of what the Patriots are doing, both in the coaching staff and in free agency thus far?
Well, to me, what was interesting is you talk to people who have been here and are at other teams, and they are legion. I'll give you one, for instance. I saw Mike Vrabel, and Mike Reese and I tried to approach him. He goes, go find Bill. I don't work there anymore. Be that as it may. I think that there is an interesting what shoe will drop with the Patriots and how long will this rebuild go on. Very little Tom Brady conversation, though. It's almost as if that page has been so completely turned. He's a buck. He is a buck.
Found it interesting, Meg, that we were talking about fullbacks even down here at the beautiful Breakers Resort. Jakob Johnson is never far from our lips. And just interesting to hear one team builder say, classic Bill, trying to save a roster spot. He's going to end up asking a tight end to do that job next year. So maybe new gig for Jonnu Smith.
Well, not a fullback, but they did add Peppers. The little recipe they got going in Foxborough. What do you make of Jabril Peppers, a safety, buying into the Patriots team now?
He's going to spice things up. I think it's another addition that might indicate the Patriots will be going away from press man with no shutdown corner and playing a ton of zone.
Yeah, I've been told he's a better zone player than man-to-man player at this point, but he gives them some speed at the second level. He's more of a box safety, more of a Patrick Chung type. So you pair him with Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips. All of a sudden, Meg, you got a lot of flexibility to cover some different weapons on opposing offenses.
But
Meg-A, I want you to land the plane.
Okay.
What?
I'm just wondering if it is nearly enough to make up for what has gone out the door, because like you said, I think we are still waiting for another shoe to drop.
No, got to be more, got to be more, got to be more.
Ain't got enough.
Great.
Meg, we're going to look at the fountain. You can watch us looking at the fountain.